August 7, 1942. 0214 hours. Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands. The first American Marines of the 1st Division waded ashore at Beach Red, carrying arms that would fundamentally challenge Japanese tactical thinking. Among the gear and packs, select Marines bore Winchester M12 shotguns, pump-action firearms with a destructive capability that Japanese military planners had never foreseen. Through the pre-dawn gloom, the Marines pushed inland from their landing beaches, encountering the initial Japanese defensive positions near the Lunga River. The events in those opening skirmishes would reveal a catastrophic misjudgment in Japanese military strategy. The Imperial Army had trained for rifle combat at range. They had drilled for bayonet assaults and sword techniques in close quarters. They had not anticipated American shotguns capable of firing as fast as a soldier could operate the pump mechanism, a mechanical reality that would shatter Japanese tactical assumptions across the Pacific. The 2,200 Japanese defenders on Guadalcanal were about to realize that American Marines had brought to the Pacific a weapon so lethal in close combat that Germany had sought to ban it from warfare in 1918. The Winchester Model 12, with its capacity to slam-fire multiple rounds in rapid succession, would prove devastating in jungle engagements, cave fighting, and night operations that defined the Pacific theater. The arithmetic of combat was about to shift. Each shell contained 9 pellets of double-aught buckshot. A Marine could discharge 6 shells in under 3 seconds using the slam-fire technique. In those few seconds, 54 projectiles would saturate the target area, far more than a Japanese soldier could fire in a minute with his bolt-action rifle. The Winchester Model 12 entered World War II with a reputation already forged in the trenches of France. During World War I, American forces had deployed earlier shotgun models with such effectiveness that on September 15, 1918, the German government lodged a diplomatic protest through Swiss channels. Preserved in U.S. State Department archives, the protest claimed that shotguns violated Article 23E of the Hague Convention by causing unnecessary suffering. The German notice explicitly stated, "The German government objects to the use of shotguns by the American Army and notes that, under the law of war, any prisoner found with such weapons or related ammunition forfeits his life." Secretary of State Robert Lansing's response was unequivocal. The United States rejected the protest and warned that any execution of American prisoners for carrying shotguns would trigger reprisals. No American soldiers were executed for possessing shotguns, and their use continued. The Model 12, introduced in 1912 as a civilian hunting firearm, had evolved considerably by 1942. The military variant, designated the M12 Trench Gun, featured a 20-inch cylinder bore barrel, compared to 26 to 30 inches on civilian versions, a perforated metal heat shield, and a bayonet mount. Most importantly, it retained the original design's lack of a trigger disconnector, a mechanical feature enabling slam firing. This capability was intentional. Winchester engineers designed the Model 12 so that holding down the trigger while cycling the pump would fire the weapon as rapidly as the operator could work it. While civilian shooters rarely used this feature, military instructors immediately recognized its battlefield potential. The Imperial Japanese Army had constructed its Pacific defensive strategy on several key assumptions outlined in their field manuals. According to U.S. War Department Technical Manual TME 30-480, Handbook on Japanese Military Forces, 1944, Japanese doctrine emphasized 2 primary tactical advantages: night operations and close quarters combat. They distinguished between Kishu, surprise night attacks, and Kyoshu, coordinated night assaults. Their infantry training devoted extensive hours to nocturnal operations, movement under cover of darkness, and silent infiltration techniques. The assumption, validated in China and early Pacific campaigns, was that night fighting would neutralize American advantages in firepower and technology. Japanese training manuals emphasized that American forces were weak in close combat and dependent on mechanical superiority. When combat closed to bayonet range, Japanese doctrine asserted the superior spirit in training of Japanese soldiers would prevail. This belief was not merely propaganda, but fundamental to Japanese tactical planning. The fall of Singapore in February 1942 had seemed to validate these assumptions. Japanese forces had overwhelmed British positions through aggressive night attacks and close combat, defeating a numerically superior force. Similar successes in the Philippines reinforced the conviction that Americans, like other Western forces, could not match Japanese soldiers in close quarters battle. The American invasion of Guadalcanal on August 7, 1942 marked the first offensive operation against Japanese forces. Among the equipment issued to Marine units were Winchester Model 12 shotguns distributed primarily to personnel tasked with jungle patrol, point defense and security duties. The exact number of Model 12s present at Guadalcanal remains unclear from historical records, but evidence confirms their presence in use. The 1st Marine Division's equipment manifests included riot-type shotguns in the infantry battalions with ammunition supplies of buckshot and slug rounds. The first major test came during the Battle of the Tinaro, actually the Elu River, on August 21, 1942. Colonel Konaichiki led 916 men of his detachment in a night assault across the sandbar at the river's mouth, exactly the type of close combat night attack that Japanese doctrine prescribed. The battle's outcome was catastrophic for Japanese forces. Of the 916 attackers, approximately 800 were killed, while Marine machine guns and artillery inflicted many casualties. The close-range fighting saw the employment of shotguns in their intended role. The after-action reports noted the effectiveness of all available weapons in repelling the assault, with specific mention of the value of increased firepower at close range. The Model 12's effectiveness derived from specific technical characteristics. According to U.S. Army ordnance testing, the military load of double-aught buckshot contained 9.33 caliber lead pellets. At 20 yards, these pellets maintained sufficient velocity to penetrate 3/4 of an inch of pine board used as a standard for approximating human tissue penetration. The spread pattern was equally important. At combat ranges of 20 to 30 yards, buckshot spread to approximately 30 in, creating a pattern density that made precise aiming unnecessary. This characteristic proved crucial in jungle warfare, where targets were often fleeting glimpses through dense vegetation. The slam fire capability multiplied these advantages. While no precise rate of fire measurements from World War II exist, post-war testing demonstrated that experienced operators could fire 5 to 6 rounds in under 3 seconds using the slam fire technique. This rate of fire exceeded many automatic weapons at close range, with the added advantage of the spreading pattern. Marines developed specific techniques for employing the Model 12. Training emphasized firing at ground level when defending against crawling infiltrators, exploiting the ricochet effect of buckshot on hard ground. In jungle settings, Marines learned to fire at sound and movement rather than waiting for clear targets, relying on the spread pattern to compensate for imprecise aiming. As Marine units gained experience through 1942 to 1943, the employment of shotguns became more sophisticated. The weapons proved particularly valuable in specific tactical situations that occurred repeatedly in Pacific combat. During the New Georgia Campaign, June to August 1943, shotguns were increasingly assigned to point men on jungle patrols. The ability to deliver immediate, devastating firepower in response to ambush proved invaluable. A Marine walking point could react to movement or sound with instant suppressive fire, potentially hitting multiple enemies with a single shot. Night defensive positions incorporated shotguns as a primary weapon against infiltration. Japanese tactics often involved small groups attempting to penetrate Marine lines in darkness, relying on stealth and blade weapons. Marines with shotguns could cover sectors with overlapping fields of fire, creating zones where infiltration became virtually impossible. The weapons also proved effective in what Marines called jungle lane shooting, clearing paths through dense vegetation where Japanese soldiers might hide. The spread pattern would strike multiple obstacles, potentially hitting concealed enemies while simultaneously stripping away foliage that provided concealment. The campaign for the Central Pacific Islands introduced a new tactical challenge: Japanese cave fortifications. beginning with Tarawa in November 1943 and escalating through subsequent operations. Japanese forces increasingly relied on fortified caves and bunkers rather than traditional defensive lines. At Pelu, September 15, 1944, Colonel Kuno Nakagawa had prepared an elaborate cave defense system. The island's coral ridges were honeycombed with natural caves that Japanese engineers had expanded and fortified. These positions, designed to withstand naval bombardment and aerial attack, required intimate close-range combat to clear. The Model 12 proved adaptable to this challenge. Marines developed techniques for cave clearing that exploited the shotgun's characteristics. The standard approach involved firing one or two shells into a cave entrance, allowing the buckshot to ricochet off interior walls. The ricocheting pellets created what Marines described as a lead storm inside confined spaces. The psychological effect often exceeded the physical. Japanese soldiers who survived reported that the sound of ricocheting buckshot in caves was uniquely terrifying. A metallic shrieking that seemed to come from all directions simultaneously. The invasion of Saipan on June 15, 1944 saw the continued evolution of shotgun tactics. The Japanese garrison of 31,000 troops under Lieutenant General Yoshitsugu Saito had prepared extensive fortifications. Learning from previous American assaults, Marine units had developed what they called shotgun teams, specialized groups tasked with close-range assault. These typically consisted of 2 shotgun-armed Marines, 1 bar gunner for suppressive fire, and 1 or 2 riflemen with grenades. The teams operated as specialized assault elements, particularly effective against fortified positions. The battle for Saipan also saw increased use of specialized ammunition. While double-aught buckshot remained standard, Marines also employed solid slug rounds for longer-range precision fire and smaller birdshot loads for stripping vegetation to expose hidden positions. On July 7, 1944, Saipan saw the largest Japanese banzai charge of the war. Approximately 3,000 to 4,000 attackers assaulting American positions. While most casualties were inflicted by machine guns and artillery, the close-range fighting that penetrated American lines saw extensive use of all available weapons, including shotguns. The ability to deliver multiple projectiles without precise aiming proved valuable in the confused melee of night combat. The Battle for Iwo, February 19 to March 26, 1945, presented the ultimate test of cave warfare tactics. General Tadamaki Kuribayashi had created the most sophisticated defensive system of the war. 11 miles of tunnel connecting over 1,500 caves, pillboxes, and fortified positions. Kuribayashi had studied American tactics from previous battles and designed his defenses to counter them. Cave entrances were angled to prevent direct fire. Multiple exits prevented entrapment, and interior chambers were offset to limit the effect of explosives and flamethrowers. Despite these preparations, Model 12 shotguns remained effective. Marines adapted by developing skip shooting, deliberately banking buckshot off tunnel walls to reach around corners. They also increased their use of white phosphorus shells, which created both casualties and smoke that forced Japanese soldiers to evacuate positions. The 21,000 Japanese defenders were gradually eliminated in brutal close-range fighting. Of these, only 216 were taken prisoner, most wounded or unconscious when captured. The nature of the fighting at Iwo, with its emphasis on eliminating fortified positions at close range, highlighted the continued relevance of weapons like the Model 12. Despite the overall mechanization of warfare, the invasion of Okinawa on April 1, 1945 represented the largest amphibious operation of the Pacific War. General Mitsuru Oshima commanded 100,000 Japanese troops in the most extensive defensive network yet constructed. Colonel Hirami Yahara, USIIMA's operations officer and one of Japan's most brilliant staff officers, had designed the defense to maximize American casualties. By Okinawa, both sides had learned from 3 years of Pacific combat. Japanese forces no longer wasted themselves in banzai charges, but fought from prepared positions. American forces had refined their combined arms tactics, with shotguns playing a specific role in the close combat phases of cave and bunker reduction. The 82-day campaign saw the full evolution of American cave clearing techniques. Marines and Army troops employed what they called blowtorch and corkscrew tactics. Flamethrowers provided the blowtorch, while demolitions and close-range weapons like shotguns served as the corkscrew to penetrate positions. The actual production and distribution of Model 12 shotguns tells a different story from popular perception. According to Winchester Company records analyzed by historian Herbert G. Howe, only 61,014 Model 12 shotguns were manufactured during World War II. An additional 1927 were repaired or refurbished by Winchester, leading to confusion about total numbers. These weapons were distributed across all service branches: Marines, Army, Navy, and Army Air Forces, not exclusively to Marine units. The Army Air Forces, for instance, used Model 12s for air-based defense and aircraft guard duties. The Navy employed them for ship security and landing party operations. This relatively limited production, 61,014 new weapons for a military of 12 million, meant that Model 12s were specialized weapons rather than general issue. They were concentrated in units expected to face close combat: Marine rifle companies, Army assault teams, and security detachments. The ammunition supply was more abundant. Military contracts for shotgun shells ran into the millions, ensuring that units equipped with shotguns had adequate ammunition for both training and combat. The standard military load was .000 buckshot with slug rounds and smaller shot sizes available for specific purposes. Evaluating the Model 12's actual combat effectiveness requires careful analysis of available evidence. After-action reports from Pacific battles consistently note the value of shotguns in specific situations while acknowledging their limitations. The weapons excelled in several scenarios consistently reported across different battles. Jungle ambush response: the ability to deliver immediate devastating firepower in response to sudden contact at close range. The spread pattern compensated for the difficulty of acquiring targets in dense vegetation. Night defense. Shotguns provided effective defense against infiltration attempts. The sound of a pump action being cycled became a psychological deterrent, while the spread pattern increased hit probability in darkness. Cave and bunker clearing. The ricochet effect in confined spaces multiplied the weapon's effectiveness. Even when direct hits were not achieved, the psychological impact of buckshot ricocheting in enclosed spaces often forced Japanese soldiers to evacuate positions. Final assault phases. When combat closed to ranges under 25 yards, shotguns provided superior firepower to bolt-action rifles and even some automatic weapons. However, the weapons had clear limitations. The effective range of 50 yards or less meant shotgun-armed troops were vulnerable to rifle fire at longer ranges. The ammunition was bulky and heavy compared to rifle rounds. The weapons required frequent cleaning in the corrosive salt air environment of the Pacific. Japanese forces attempted various countermeasures to American close combat weapons, including shotguns. These adaptations documented and captured Japanese materials and post-war interrogations reveal both the perceived threat and the difficulty of countering it. Some Japanese units experimented with body armor, including thick wooden or bamboo plates designed to stop buckshot. These proved cumbersome and only partially effective as buckshot could still cause disabling injuries to exposed areas. Tactical adaptations included increasing the depth of defensive positions to prevent infiltration by assault teams, creating false positions to absorb initial attacks, and using obstacles to maintain engagement distances beyond shotgun range. Despite these efforts, Japanese forces never developed fully effective counters to American close combat tactics. The fundamental problem was material. Japan lacked the industrial capacity to match American firepower at any range, forcing continued reliance on tactics that brought them into the very close-range fights where weapons like the Model 12 excelled. The German protest of 1918 regarding shotgun use created a legal precedent that influenced World War II employment. The American rejection of German protests established that shotguns were legitimate weapons of war under international law. Interestingly, despite the Model 12's effectiveness against Japanese forces, Japan never filed a similar protest. This absence may reflect several factors. Japan's own conduct in China had violated numerous international conventions, making legal protests problematic. The deteriorating diplomatic situation left few channels for such protests, and by the time shotguns proved particularly effective, Japan was already losing the war decisively. The legal acceptance of shotguns as legitimate weapons contrasted with restrictions on other weapons. Poison gas, banned after World War I, was not used in the Pacific despite the tactical advantages it might have provided in cave warfare. The shotgun, despite its devastating close-range effects, remained within accepted bounds of warfare. The Marine Corps developed specific training programs for shotgun employment based on combat experience. The Scout Sniper School at Camp Loon included shotgun training, though the exact curriculum from World War II has not survived in detail. Training emphasized several key principles derived from combat experience and munition management. Unlike rifle ammunition, shotgun shells were bulky and heavy. Marines learned to carry shells in elastic loops on belts and bandoliers for rapid access. The standard load was 50 to 60 shells with resupply a constant concern. Shooting positions. The pump action required different stances than rifle shooting. Marines practiced firing from the hip during movement, point shooting without using sights, and maintaining balance while cycling the action rapidly. Target selection. Shotgunners learned to engage closest threats first and to sweep across multiple targets rather than focusing on individuals. The spread pattern meant that precise aiming was less important than rapid target engagement. Weapon maintenance. The Pacific environment was particularly hard on weapons. Salt spray, sand, and humidity could quickly render a Model 12 inoperable. Daily maintenance became essential with emphasis on keeping the action clean and lubricated. The American use of shotguns in World War II was relatively unique among major combatants. Other nations' approaches to close combat revealed different tactical philosophies. Britain. The British military made limited use of shotguns, primarily for prisoner guard duties and specialized operations. British doctrine emphasized the submachine gun, particularly the Sten gun for close combat. Soviet Union. The Soviets relied heavily on the PPSH-41 submachine gun for close combat, producing over 6 million during the war. The high rate of fire and larger magazine capacity suited Soviet mass assault tactics. Germany. Despite protesting shotgun use in World War I, Germany produced limited numbers of shotguns for Eastern Front combat. However, the MP-40 submachine gun remained their primary close combat weapon. Japan. Japan produced virtually no combat shotguns, maintaining focus on rifles, bayonets, and traditional blade weapons for close combat. This reflected both industrial limitations and cultural preferences. The American adoption of Shotguns reflected a pragmatic approach to warfare, using the most effective tool for specific situations, regardless of traditional military conventions. Understanding the Model 12's role requires placing it within the broader context of American combat doctrine in the Pacific. The weapon was one element in a combined arms approach that integrated naval gunfire, air support, artillery, automatic weapons, flamethrowers, and demolitions. The typical sequence for reducing a Japanese fortified position by 1945 illustrates this integration. Naval gunfire and aerial bombardment to suppress and isolate the position. Artillery and mortar fire to prevent reinforcement. Machine guns and bar fire to suppress defensive fire. Assault teams approach with flamethrowers and demolitions. Shotguns employed in the final assault phase to clear positions. Engineers seal or destroy the position. The shotgun's role was specific but important, providing overwhelming close-range firepower in the critical moments when Americans and Japanese soldiers met at distances measured in feet rather than yards. The psychological impact of weapons often exceeds their physical effects. The Model 12 had demonstrable effects on both American and Japanese morale, though these must be assessed carefully given the propaganda and mythology surrounding weapons. For American forces, the shotgun provided confidence in close combat situations. Marines and soldiers knew they possessed devastating firepower at short range, reducing anxiety about Japanese infiltration and banzai charges. The mechanical simplicity and reliability of the Model 12 also inspired confidence. It rarely jammed and was simple to operate under stress. The distinctive sound of a pump-action cycling became a morale factor itself. Veterans reported that the sound reassured friendly troops, while potentially deterring enemy action. This psychological effect, while difficult to quantify, appears consistently in veteran accounts. After Japan's surrender, the U.S. military conducted extensive analysis of weapons' effectiveness in the Pacific War. The Model 12 and other shotguns received mixed assessments. The weapons were credited with exceptional effectiveness in specific situations, particularly cave clearing and night defense. The ability to deliver multiple projectiles without precise aiming proved valuable in the confused close-range fighting common in the Pacific. However, analysts also noted limitations. The short range left shotgun armed troops vulnerable in open terrain. The weapons were less effective against Japanese bunkers with small firing apertures. The logistical burden of supplying specialized ammunition complicated supply operations. Despite these limitations, shotguns remained in U.S. military inventory. The Model 12 served in Korea, where it again proved effective in close combat and night fighting. In Vietnam, shotguns were employed by pointmen on patrols and for tunnel clearing operations, directly applying lessons learned in the Pacific. The Model 12's mechanical design influenced subsequent military shotguns. The pump-action mechanism proved more reliable in combat conditions than semi-automatic designs. The slam fire capability, while eventually eliminated for safety reasons in civilian models, remained valued for military applications. The historical record of Model 12 employment in World War II comes from multiple sources, each with limitations. Official after-action reports. These provide tactical overviews, but rarely detail individual weapons employment. References to shotguns typically appear only when noting special effectiveness or problems. Unit equipment records. These document shotgun distribution, but not actual combat use. Many records were lost or destroyed during the war. Technical manuals. Military manuals describe the weapon's operation and basic employment, but not specific combat experiences. Veteran accounts, post-war memoirs, and oral histories provide anecdotal evidence, but must be evaluated carefully for accuracy and representation. Japanese records, captured documents. and post-war interrogations provide the enemy perspective, but are limited by translation issues and the destruction of many Japanese records. Photographic evidence. Combat. Photographs occasionally show Marines with shotguns, but cannot document their effectiveness. This fragmentary evidence requires careful analysis to separate documented fact from mythology and assumption. The Model 12's employment highlighted the vast industrial and technological gap between the United States and Japan. American forces could afford to issue specialized weapons for specific tactical situations. The industrial capacity to produce 61,014 shotguns, weapons with limited military application, while simultaneously producing millions of rifles, hundreds of thousands of machine guns, and tens of thousands of artillery pieces, demonstrated overwhelming material superiority. Japan, conversely, struggled to provide basic rifles and ammunition to its forces. The Japanese Type 99 rifle, while excellent in design, suffered from declining manufacturing quality as the war progressed. By 1945, Japanese forces were fielding bamboo spears alongside rifles, highlighting their industrial collapse. This disparity extended to ammunition. American forces could expend shotgun shells freely in training and combat. Standard procedure called for using fresh ammunition and discarding shells that showed any corrosion or damage. Japanese forces, meanwhile, counted every rifle cartridge and often relied on captured ammunition. The development of shotgun tactics in the Pacific demonstrates American military adaptability. Unlike rigid military hierarchies that imposed tactics from above, American forces encouraged innovation at the small unit level. Marines who discovered effective techniques shared them informally. Successful methods spread through units by word of mouth and demonstration. Officers incorporated proven techniques into training and doctrine. This bottom-up innovation process allowed rapid tactical adaptation. The skip shooting technique for cave clearing, for example, appears to have developed independently in multiple units facing similar challenges. Marines discovered that buckshot would ricochet predictably off rock walls, allowing them to shoot around corners. This technique, born of necessity and experimentation, became standard procedure. Similarly, the use of mixed ammunition loads, alternating buckshot and slug rounds, developed from combat experience rather than pre-war doctrine. Marines learned that the combination provided flexibility in engaging varied targets without changing weapons. While tactical weapons like the Model 12 played important roles, the Pacific War's outcome was determined by larger strategic factors. American submarine warfare strangled Japanese logistics. Strategic bombing destroyed Japanese industry. Naval supremacy isolated Japanese garrisons. The atomic bombs ended Japanese resistance without invasion. Within this strategic framework, weapons like the Model 12 contributed to tactical success that supported operational and strategic objectives. Efficient reduction of Japanese positions conserved American manpower, maintained offensive momentum, and demonstrated the futility of continued resistance. The shotgun's effectiveness in cave clearing, for instance, reduced casualties in the grinding attrition battles of 1944 to 1945. Each fortified position cleared quickly meant fewer American casualties and faster advance to strategic objectives, like airfields and ports. The Model 12's employment in the Pacific offers lessons about military innovation and adaptation, existing technology and new applications. The Model 12 was a 30-year-old design when World War II began. Innovation came not from new technology, but from applying existing technology to new tactical problems. User-driven innovation, the most effective tactics developed from bottom-up experimentation by combat users rather than top-down doctrine development. Specialized versus general purpose. The Model 12 excelled in specific situations, but had clear limitations. military forces must balance specialized capabilities with general-purpose requirements. Training and technology. The weapon's effectiveness depended on proper training. Technology alone, without doctrine and training, provides limited advantage. Industrial base. The ability to produce and supply specialized weapons and ammunition depends on robust industrial capacity. Tactical innovation requires logistical support. Behind the technical and tactical analysis were human beings. American Marines and soldiers who carried Model 12s into combat and Japanese soldiers who faced them. Their experiences, while filtered through memory and mythology, provide essential perspective. Marines who carried shotguns often did so by choice, trading the longer range of rifles for devastating close-range firepower. This decision reflected individual assessment of tactical requirements and personal preference. Some Marines swore by the shotgun's effectiveness. Others preferred the versatility of rifles. The weapons operation under combat stress tested human capabilities. Slam firing required physical strength and coordination while under fire. The technique that seemed simple in training became challenging when exhausted, terrified, or wounded. Yet, Marines consistently performed these actions effectively in combat. The Winchester Model 12's employment in the Pacific War demonstrated both American military adaptability and industrial capability. The weapon proved exceptionally effective in specific tactical situations: cave clearing, night defense, jungle ambush response, and final assault phases. Its slam-fire capability provided devastating close-range firepower that Japanese forces struggled to counter. However, the Model 12's significance must be considered in proper perspective. Only 61,014 units were manufactured during World War II, making it a specialized arm rather than a standard infantry weapon. Its effectiveness relied on coordination with other arms in combined operations. The outcome of the Pacific War was shaped by strategic considerations far beyond individual weapons. The Japanese military's inability to anticipate or counter American shotgun usage reflected broader errors in assessing American military capabilities. Japanese doctrine prioritized spiritual factors and individual warrior proficiency while undervaluing American technological advantages and tactical creativity. The Model 12, straightforward in design yet devastating in execution, exemplified the pragmatic American approach to warfare. From Guadalcanal to Okinawa, through dense jungles and cave systems, the distinctive sound of pump-action cycling signaled American tactical ingenuity. Marines and soldiers equipped with Model 12s proved that an industrialized democracy could design and deploy specialized arms for particular combat challenges. The weapon Germany had condemned as inhumane became simply another tool in the American arsenal. The Model 12's influence extended beyond World War II. The tactics honed in the Pacific shaped American military doctrine through Korea, Vietnam, and into modern conflicts. The focus on close-range firepower, mission-specific weapons, and operator-driven tactical adaptation remains relevant today. Japanese infantry never expected Winchester M12 trench guns to slam fire through their defenses because such capabilities contradicted their fundamental understanding of warfare. The Model 12 sent a clear message: American forces would deliver overwhelming firepower at all ranges, leveraging every available technology refined through continuous innovation. In the brutal calculus of Pacific combat, the Model 12 contributed decisively to American victories. Its impact lay not just in the weapon itself, but in what it symbolized: America's readiness to adopt effective tools, develop inventive tactics, and harness industrial production to solve battlefield problems. Japanese soldiers confronting these arms realized that their adversaries had mastered not only the art of combat but the science of systematically applying firepower to overcome defenses, neutralize obstacles, and achieve success through a combination of material superiority and tactical ingenuity.